Testing 1, 2, testing 1, 2.
Yes, I'm finally tired of his heart. Finally made it come, and he's still trying to get right.
Shalom, shalom. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm listening in just to make sure that this new microphone is picking up a bit. So, and I can hear myself. I don't need to monitor that any longer. Hello, Johnny, Jilly, thank you for coming. It's been a long time since I treaded the liminal streams, so wanted to take this opportunity to kind of catch up and give some off-the-cuff guff about the goings-on and all the things that are happening. I hope you guys are doing well. I sound good. Well, that is a plus. I think one of the things I wanted to talk about today, if I can get into focus, this nice new camera, is all the processes behind everything that takes to even get to this live. I do a lot. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of new processes. There's a lot of new things being, focused and regurgitated and malformed and transmuted. So hopefully this inclination, if I say an autofocus would probably be good on the 4K camera, but little things like that have been kind of the boon and the issue as of late. Not in a bad way. As some of you patrons know, I posted what was supposed to be another millionth camera and microphone test, and I think I had just hit an apotheosis of disgruntled, but also a form of communication within this whole testing and tinkering phase, where I just started to monologue, and it kind of became a testament to when an artist thinks something is done or is shareable, and it rarely has anything to do with perfection. It has everything to do with when the artist gives up, or when they think that a vision is met, or it's good enough. In my case, it's usually good enough. Jilly says I'm always fighting with the camera and lighting. Yeah, you and me both. And my continual experimentation with dead technology and old forms of media, especially equipment. I'm always battling these lifelines that are kind of intrinsic in them too. Are the batteries going to persist? Is the lithium, the actual elemental pieces of this equipment that has been discarded the last 30 years or whatever, is it going to give out? And unfortunately, I come across that is the cross to bear when working with all of this discarded dead technology. Is you find that you may give it life in one last breath of gust, and mid focusing that journey or that finality of a vision, it gives out and it gives up the ghost. And that's just something you have to parlay with, I think, especially in deeply intrinsic artistic practices too. Is that's where the communion is that you're working with this technology, you're giving it life again, but it does in a way have a ghost all of its own, and it decides when it's had enough, or the decay is too much, and you have a really expensive paperweight at the end of the day. And the dimming room here, where I am floating in this kind of blue vortex, is a veritable cemetery of dead technology. But that's another bit of the processes too, and my deep hope to routinize, or to find these like conduits of ways where I can be multi-armed and multi-dimensional at the drop of a coin. And I have a cache of weaponry at the battle station that I can pick and foresee a vision, or like paint a picture without so much back end hullabaloo. Like that may just never happen the way I previously intended on wanting it. That part of this deep parlay within this artistic process, whether it's Prag Magic or We the Hallowed or the album, is that I'm always going to be contending with the dynamism of being deeply intentional with the pieces and the gear and the animism of what I'm working with, or the space. And it can work against you sometimes, or it can have other intentions and have other methods that it needs to figure out first. So I'm in a very deep process as of late of reflection and kind of not contentment, but I'm okay. I'm getting the breath and like the awarded relaxation of knowing that the stress of time and self-imposed deadlines is so antithetical to the artistic process as a whole a lot of the time, especially in this age of fucking hyper hustle culture, content creation, bullshit, that somehow psychically kind of poisons us all into thinking that we need to create at a momentum or produce at like a momentum akin to everyone else, or on some sort of circadian rhythm that's attached to everything else. And that's just not the case. Granted, I still do a lot, and I'm forever finding ways to like tickle that part of myself that wants combustible, creative exorcisms, while also tending to the big ideas and big projects. And yeah, so as of late, I've been really psychically kind of binding myself to that notion that leaving a lot of room up for transmutation, or for things to change. I mean, the album that I've been working on forever, it's the first time in my life as a songwriter, or as somebody that has recorded and released music, has not just released an album and moved on to the next album. I released this last album, or that iteration, this guy, on cassette tape, and that was a way of putting it to bed, but knowing it wasn't finished, that I was going to keep working on it. It wasn't right yet, or it didn't attune to the vision, and being okay with however long that took. And of course, in the throes of life and schisms and reality and the shared somatic reality, life happens. And now what I had thought was going to be a routinization has been upended, and I'm going to be relocating to Portland, Oregon in the fall, full time. Back to Portland, back to the place that created pretty much the track that I'm on now. So I'm really swept up in this reflective moment, which I know some of you might be thinking, like, no shit, Sherlock, you created, a metaphysical practice that dances with ghosts of the past. Like, I'm sure you're fucking reflective all the time, right? But and even with that too, how Hauntomancy started, that was that first working brought me to Portland. Was it 4 years ago, 3 years ago? It brought me to Portland in the same quadrants when I was trying to invoke the year of 2017. And instead, because, I'm not time traveling, all it could do was put me in the same ingredients or around the same ecosystem of what I was invoking. So I was in the same house. After that working, I got a job offer that took me back to the company, the outdoor education program I was working in, staying at the same house Mary and I kindled our relationship with in 2017. I was completely thrusted back in the Portland atmosphere, but time is linear, right? So everything had kind of moved on that needed to move on. So I knew then that I wasn't ready to go back to Portland, and that that specter working was only the first part of an ongoing hauntomantic practice. And here I am, many hauntomancy practices later, and I am now being almost awarded the return to Portland, knowing what I know now. Had worked through a lot of the traumas and kind of like, undead ghosts and things that wouldn't have been healthy or given me the ability to do so when it first thrust me in. And, through the hauntomancy practice too, I've realized that no one practice is singular. It's almost like you need the marriage of the specter, the aspecter, and the prospector, and this kind of spiral, this loop, the dissolve, echo, resonar, then dissolving that, echoing, resonating, it is this kind of cyclical force. It's, I don't know if there's a term, I'm sure there is in philosophy. It's almost like a positive or more of an idealistic eternal return, like a Nietzschean eternal return, but one that isn't, a hell that you must transcend, even though that is part of it, and the positivity is kind of in that transcendental movement. I don't know. I'm rambling. Anyways, good to see everybody. Yeah, Renee says she can't commit because she's not a Patreon member. Commit? Oh, you don't have to commit. Yeah, if you're not a Patreon member and you're totally welcome to watch this or to hang out. You're welcome to share the link with Renee, John. No, not Portland, John says. Oh boy, Portland. Jilly says. Oh boy, Portland again. Oh, comment. Oh yeah, if you send her the stream link, she's welcome to come in. I don't think this is this being a Patreon only is because it was shared to patrons only. But I'm never a gatekeeping type. If somebody wants to comment or say hi that's around it, please do so. But it's good to see everybody. But I love this comment. Julie says, oh boy, Portland again. Yes. But isn't that the kind of summation of our lives in a way? I mean, some of us never leave a place that we're reared in and, gain the faculties of growth and the human experience and do the prodigal thing. Or they do the prodigal thing where they leave, they go test the world, and they come back in some way. Some of them stay but bring a mutation of that. In a way, for me, as somebody that doesn't have a home, that is not necessarily from anywhere, that doesn't have a still standing structure from my childhood, or, even a place, an atmosphere that I could truly call home, being from a lot of places, really, being moved around a bunch in different family structures and I had to make my own home. I had to find my own. And Portland was the first city that I chose that had no relation. I had no family, no friends. I was 18, 19 years old, jumped off a train, and Portland became this thing in my life that, whether I like it or not, is an unmovable, unshakable, foundational force. And I think when I look deeply into what the last 5 years provided, not counting my sojourn to Denver, I have moved a lot in the past 5 years. But when I think about leaving Portland in 2019, I think about a lot of unfinished business, but I think about it being something that I needed to leave. It had hit a point where I needed to test what I had gained and the momentum that I had, and I needed to break that down. I needed to dissolve that, right? And then I needed to find out what to echo, what actions, what things, what builds me as a human, what's in my DNA. And a lot of that stuff, was situated, was orchestrated, was created in Portland. It birthed my dog, it birthed my relationship, it birthed We the Hallowed, it birthed Prag Magic, it birthed Revelator Roz, it birthed, some of my best testaments and architectural, artistic moments. It's, whether I like it or not, it's, for all intents and purposes, like where I'm from. It's the place I've lived the longest in my life, even though that's not saying much. I think collectively I've lived there 10 years, which is longer than any city I've lived in my life. And yeah, like I was saying, it wanted to thrust me back there when I started Hauntomancy. It wanted to put me back. Oh, you want to invoke 2017, the bounties of 2017 that birthed, your relationship, that birthed the podcast, that birthed Cactus Crown, the Dakota Slim album, that birthed all these magnanimous things. Well, here, I can't, Hauntomancy was basically saying, I can't, give you those things as they were, but I can put you back in the same environment because, a lot of things have moved on since then. So here you go. And that's, that's what happened. I was thrust back there and was like, whoa, I'm not ready for this. I don't want to be back here yet. I'm not done here. And so I jumped ship. But if it wasn't for that, for initial thrust back into Portland, I wouldn't have been on the, the career path I am now that has afforded me freedom and some structure that I will be taking with me to Portland. It feels earned. It feels like a prodigal son kind of moment in that, I am bringing back a changed and attuned kind of self. Renee says, I've only lived in California and Washington. Yeah, some people don't need to test the boundaries like that, physically. And I've always been jealous of that. Some people have. I will never know what it's like to have a foundation, that like a foundational structure that's still there, like a hometown, or like a, a family home or something like that. And so I kind of had to build my own in a way. And I guess Portland is a substitute for that. Jilly says, it feels like you are going home moving back to Portland. Yep. Yeah, for sure. It does. There's a lot of that. Jonaside says, all remember you in Denver was that's when COVID started. And the CW's nostalgia loop work. Or that's separate. But yes, we left Portland for Denver, going out west style. And COVID hit, and we basically just lasted the entirety of COVID in Denver. And it was brutal. I don't look back on Denver as with too many positives, but it was necessary, Joey says, I've lived in the same town my entire life. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm jealous of that. I wish, But yeah, as you said, you had to leave. It's all part of the journey. Yeah. And I had to kind of build my own from nothing. And Portland, truly did come through. And as much shit as I like to give it, I'm allowed to. It's like anyone's hometown. Who's undying and unchanging with sheer admiration for their hometown, right? I imagine nobody. I imagine everyone's got some fickle resolve about, where they're from. It's a love-hate thing, like family, like blood family anyway. I share that. I have that with Portland for sure. But yeah, CW's Nostalgia Loop work, yeah, that came in during the Denver thing. And excuse me if I'm causing sounds. I have my wireless mic on, so I'm unsure if I'm making annoying noises outside of the talking. Like if I scratch my beard, I've got to watch that. But yeah, CW's Nostalgia Loop work. And then that, CW's Nostalgia Loop work actually came in, has been pretty prescient because just last month it's been 10 years of We the Hallowed, which was birthed in an art gallery in Portland 10 years ago. And yeah, it's nuts to think that is 10 years old. You are not making noises, no ASMR happening. Good. I'm glad. Yeah, the whole point was, I remember in old liminal streams, like, I could never localize the mic. So I took some professional, my own professional advice, like I would in my day job, and say, let's lav them up. And so I'm doing that to myself. So, but yeah, what I was saying was, 10 years of We the Hallowed, which is, it's fucking nuts that this thing has existed for 10 years, in many iterations. But I think now has been the most important iteration, even though I miss the monthly salons we used to hold at a residency at a venue in Portland. I miss those. I miss a lot of components of those like formative years of We the Hallowed, which I'm excited to get back to. I've got a lot of prospector kind of workings to do with We the Hallowed once we get back to Portland. A lot of it has to do with venues, and a lot of it has to do with events, and a lot of it has to do with in-person, getting back to the in-person salon. Lots of experimental performance and artistic, kind of revelry around that has been so missing, I think. Not only just in where I've been, because Seattle's been a hard nut to crack for finding like the real big weirdos that are into a lot of that stuff. It's happening, it's here, it's just not as, easy to parse, I think. Because it is such a city, it's a, and that's another thing, I just am not a city guy, I just am not. So that'll be nice to get back to more space. I'm gonna miss this dimming room though. What has come out of this room, this sacred space, has been so foundational and like so magnanimous. And it's been hard for me I relate it to like, the haircut paradox, or that's what I've termed it. I'm sure there's an actual paradox named after this kind of sensation, but it's like when you're about to get a haircut, but that day you're going to get a haircut, it's never looked better. And you're like, fuck, do I really need a haircut? Like, it looks great. I don't want to mess it up. But of course, this is this fleeting thing. You choose not to get the haircut, then the next day, there it is again, all the problems you wish you did. I feel that way about places that I leave. That if I could exist in this like temporal moment, right when you're about to make a big change, like you're about to leave somewhere, that's some of my happiest times, because like it affords you like the wealth of like looking at things as they are, and being super present, and it affords you like this bounty of like really cherishing, you know, your neighborhood or your space or like your corner store or the routes you take. And so I've been sitting with that. I've been existing in that, because as we inch into August, that's going to be kind of the apex of when things are going to start kicking into high gear. We're going to have to be really hitting the ground, finding our new digs in Portland and all that, and coordinating. I left my full-time audiovisual specialist work, which, if anyone knows the industry, getting full-time work is really hard to do. It's usually a freelance-based kind of structure, which is something I always wanted to dive into anyways. I always was intended to be a freelancer because of schedule autonomy. It is very well paid, combustible work. You know, you work shows and events, and after that show or event, you change your mind and you get to something else. For somebody, you know, maybe on the spectrum like I am, and that needs kind of combustible but highly focused, kind of hyper specific job things, and not, you know, boring, stagnant, kind of routinized work. That's amazing. That's why you get into this. Two, you know, also it's because the big idea was that it handles all of the scientific and technical side of all my passions. You know, so it feeds all of the technical side of how to create, you know, big productions, or to film, or to, you know, it's a beautifully like symbiotic, right? Anyways, to get a full-time position doing that, especially in a market or whatever you call it, like you know, Seattle, is really hard won, and I was able to get one. I was like, everything was showing me I was on the right track. I was getting really situated, and then when the time came to decide whether if Portland was going to be the next step, I took a hard, long meditative look about, I think, Seattle in a future casting sort of way of like, where do we go from here? Like, how does this attune to what we want? Which a lot of that has to do with autonomy and space and the ability to host events and run businesses, and has very little to do with city life, as it were, or being that plugged in and necessary. And if we had kept on that same track that I was on, it would be, sure, I get higher paying things and live in maybe bigger places, but the money would equally dissipate. It would be like, you make more, you spend more, rent goes higher, like everything was just canceling out, and it just felt like this that stagnant loop. Even though the work itself is very fulfilling and combustible and sporadic, the actual big picture of it didn't seem like I would be able to attain what I'm setting out to do as quick as I would be able to in a place like Portland comparatively. And so that was the big push factor. And so I took that job that was hard won. I hated it. I've come to find, because I found the stagnation, I found the routinization in that. Even though the work itself could be dynamic, I found the gnawing, gaping maw of, you know, boring, not just boring, but like kind of soul-eating kind of monotony. And I was able to see the end of that, jump out of that, and go into freelancing. And even though it wasn't on my timeline, I had planned on going to freelancing, you know, after saving far much more money. Because I'm not doing great money-wise or anything. Like, we really are, like, being paid to exist, you know, as the capitalist structure, kind of keeps greasing its wheels. Like, it costs a lot to live, especially here. And so I had to take that deep plunge and jump away from that kind of cushion and into freelancing, biting my nails, being really, really concerned with, like, it's going to be a few months before I find, clients and that I can work somewhat regularly and can be dependable again. And that wasn't the case, thankfully. I jumped into freelancing and immediately started working almost just as much, annoyingly so, just as much. Because that was the other big thing. I was working so fucking much, 60-hour weeks. Now I'm working 50-hour weeks. So things are better, but just as like exhaustive and dynamic. And I'm thankful for that, because jumping into freelancing, I could have easily gotten washed over with lost opportunities and not being dependable. And that's a huge scare of mine as somebody that has had to make everything from scratch. If I can't be a provider of some sorts, that's I'll flip burgers before that happens. So I didn't skip a beat in that way, but at the same time, it hasn't been great for my mental health, in the sense that I'm in dire need of what I think humans call a vacation. And I've just been at it. And then when I'm not working, I'm peeling away at, rewriting the new We the Hallowed tethers, which has been going great, or working on the album, or it's just nonstop, day or night. So what I mean to say by all this is, like, I have been very conscious about being easier on myself about, deadlines and timelines, and making sure things are progressive, but at the same time not debilitating, and fighting against that hustle culture, that whatever, generational psychic bullshit that we've been ingrained in, fighting against that and being healthier and trying, and and it is a little daunting that I won't find routinization until we have settled in Portland. So I've been finding daily kind of divergent magic practices and creative practices that can anchor me, that can, tether me to some form-fitting constant, as opposed to being on a strict routine, which, is the contradiction that I hold. I think that's if you chalk it up to astrology, that might be the Pisces Virgo rising, is that I am forever looking for creative and foundational ways to build structure around spontaneity, which is a complete oxymoronic and terribly ill-fitting kind of, avenue, but it's one that I'm obsessed with, and I will find it one way or another, and then I will ruin that, and I will make another, because that is the cross I bear, I guess. But yeah. Jilly says, of course, you almost romanticize where you are, forgetting why you are leaving. Yeah. Renee says, do you know where you're looking in Portland? We do. We have some... Yeah, we have a list of neighborhoods and quadrants. We know it so well that we know where we don't want to live in Portland. I'll put it that way. That's awesome. It's like you didn't miss a step. My job is soul crushing these days. That's almost like what they're, empowered to do. That's almost like what jobs are for, to be honest. To squeeze every ounce out of you until you don't have any more. But I'm not going to get on a anti-capitalistic screed or tirade. And I'll just say that, yeah, that whole system and the machination of how, society is greased up and wheeled right now is brutal, and it's dark, and it's a tundra if you don't take care of yourself and have other exciting or exorcisms outside, or a family, or, some bigger focus, some bigger projection. If you're just stuck within that, system and that kind of grind, that is brutal. But luckily, Jilly, you've got a wonderful family and bigger fish to fry than to succumb to that sort of sadness, thankfully. So us childless types, or childless types, I should say, get to live in the existential cycles of selfish narcissism until we expire, I guess. I don't know. Hopefully that's not forever. But yeah. It is exceptionally hot here in the dimming room. I'm only being lit by outside sunshine right now, which is really nice. But yeah, I just wanted to check in, tell everybody kind of point blank, not hide behind a script or, an overture or an orchestrated kind of, episode or whatever that I was planning and I was working on. And just to let you all know that that's what's happening in my life, is that I am caught in that troika type, the tetherless triangle, the 3 dots, that, kind of initiation, process, observation. This kind of like a sequence of things where I understand that there's the contrasting sentiments within me, that things are changing. I am leaving Seattle, but I am being very present within Seattle. And I'm not leaving. There is no black and white with any of this. I will be coming up for work still, and thankfully I'll be allowed to do that. I wanted to ask for prayers. My mom has ovarian cancer, and she just had her first chemo. Oh my goodness, Renee, yes, send her all of my, please, take all of my currents and energies. Yeah, I'm sorry she's going through that, but, I also understand that still stage 3, it's insane. Yeah, I am so sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. Please give her all of the psychic hugs and heavy high fives and awesome somatic cuddles and, brilliant time. That's the thing, folks. That's the fucking thing. That's the currency of which we are all awarded and take for granted, and that is time. And if we could just utilize that as a currency more, if we could spend time with each other more, if we could be with each other more, if we could talk with each other more, if we could, have more of an exchange of time, I think things would be working a lot better. Genocide that says, that's weird. My mother-in-law has the same thing. Fancy that. It's almost like they're the same person. But yeah, time is important, and I think presence is important. When I was doing the aspect or working with Hontomancy, the whole thing was that I wanted to invoke that part of myself that when I was a child or when I was younger, I used to work into the night and be experimental and creative, and it was like time stood still, and I was like so present in creating and constructing these magnanimous mutant symphonies that no one would hear, or I'd be circuit bending instruments and making weird noises and creating weird films that no one would see, and it wasn't bound or burdened by like judgment or any of that. And that was a huge part of my process going forward. There's the other side of that I'm also finding, is that, like I said in that draft magic monologue thing I posted, there's a point though when the opportunity to share is just as important. Is that the tinkering into the night and being alone and being a mad wizard unto yourself is beautiful and boundless, but it's not complete without that kind of tundra of shareability, of like symbiosis of being with somebody, of being open and vulnerable with other people. And so I'm finding that aspector being answered now with the prospector of both of those things, of shoot from the hip, be brash, be vulnerable, but also, don't be bound by others' eyes. I think there's a beautiful, vertique, or there's a beautiful connected point between those seemingly opposite things that we should exist in. And, one of the other crosses I might have to bear is that other people are important, Hey, I got her to laugh. That's what Jonathan says, yeah. Yes, Keats, we need more time, or need to make the time to connect. I wish we had something like Jiggy, but to have them themes every once in a while. Yeah, I think there's a place. There's definitely a well. Jiggy provided a service for all of us to come and be a goofball, but he also provided a service for all of us to be pretty critical, and I needed that time in my life to find out, how to navigate this thoroughfare of digital media and combustible media and live streaming, and what I want out of it, but also like what I want to leave behind. And what Jiggy left behind was definitely a vacancy for bringing people together in a salon type way. And I have a plan for that. Once we get suited in Portland, the dimming room is also going to be a set of sorts, and I plan to stream salons where people will be in room sharing things, but we will also interact with the chat and whatnot. And I think part of that, I have to give credit, part of the genesis of wanting to even include a live stream or liminal stream capability was because of what Jiggy was able to achieve and show us, like, how fun they can be, but also like how rewarding and how moving and honest. I think that's important. I see a lot today of so much dishonesty, or so much uncouth truths, rage baiting, and just like cyclical, terrible behavior from internet personalities that it turns me off of the whole thing entirely. But it shouldn't. What it should do is it should motivate. It should motivate you to answer that and do something else. And I think that's why We the Hollowed was built, was because I was angry about seeing kind of institutionalized or academia or anything in the art world gatekeeping, elitism. Part of that was reactionary, and why, motivated to create We the Hallowed, a place for individual and anarchic artists that are metaphysically minded, no matter the current that they're mired in, to come together and just fucking, bash ideas and creations, but more importantly, to be motivated to create, like to give genesis and to give a room for creation, for people to be somatically active. And I think that's the other issue I see a lot today, is that there isn't, a lot of it ends with the live stream, or the live stream is the apex, and it shouldn't be. It should be a thoroughfare, or it should be a messaging service to get people to do things outside of their prisms or the black phones, behind their screens. It should be a motivating force for themselves to create and to do things. And I think we've hit that wall with ChatGPT. We're finding, with AI, we're finding that people want to make mistakes. People want human error. People want, the vulnerability. They want the blemishes and the roughness. And like, we don't need everything to be perfect. We don't need, everything to be clean and docile. We want rough and tumble, and we want messy, and a lot of that still exists in this shared somatic reality. So if we could take what Jiggy did, bringing people together during COVID, where we couldn't be together, but branching people, individuals from all parts of the world, Scotland, Denver, fucking Seattle, with you guys, and all parts of the world coming together at an agreed upon time and space, being goofy, being critical, being fun, sharing what everybody was doing, and then branching out and doing their own things. Like, there is a hole that needs to be filled in that case. And I have an idea to help fill that hole once we get situated in Portland. And it has a lot to do, and it's tethered with a space. Because I want to bring back what we were doing with the Hollowed was the monthly salons, the in-person performance variety show salons. If you listen to the first episodes of Prag Magic, those were all interviews recorded in front of a live audience. And those were from those salons. And I want to bring that back. But now, because of where technology is, what we learned with Jiggy, how I learned to live stream, and all these other back-end processes with what I do as far as like event technology and broadcast and all that, merging all that together, that would be paramount. Be paramount to do an in-studio audience, or not, I don't want to say audience, more interactive thing in person with interacting with, people who aren't there, but people in the chat and all of that. So, yeah, I'm excited. That's a big thing. Right now, what we're doing, I think I have this hooked up. Look how fancy I am. Shazam! Right now, like, I was just working on this. This is, how many pages right now? 27, single space, but this is the We the Hollowed organization and scripture outline. So, this is our back-end work for this refortification of We the Hollowed, as far as like member services, as far as like the metaphysics of it, as far as the pragmatic, results of it, the titles, roles, situations, there's so much here, and Eric Millar and I have been working really hard in the back end. 10 years later, here we are, and we should have this printed and published relatively soon, So that's a huge, huge thing for us at the moment. And that all comes into what we were talking about, where, if we host these at least monthly salons, maybe it can be more shows or broadcasts under We the Hollowed doing different things, but it would also, that's part of all of this foundational structure as well. So that's a little insight on that. I've shared a rough draft of it through Patreon. We've changed a lot of that since, which reminds me this week I'll share an updated draft. I've been trying to keep patrons privy of all of the back end structuring, even the wooest of woo that's in there, or the philosophical, existential, nutsoid ramblings, all of it. Been trying to keep people, privy and aware of those processes, because I want you included. I want people included to see how we are formulating this thing, how 10 years of constituting, a publishing and multimedia magical, collective here. We the Hollowed has turned into this huge kind of fountain where if you go to wethehollowed.org, it's our archives of everything. We now, integrated a store. This is our somatic stuff that we've been doing, which has been going well. Actually, next month, because of my moving, we've initiated artist-curated somatic packages. So next month, Eric Millar is going to curate the package for somatic subscribers. So it's going to be printed, published books and stuff. It's going to be really exciting. And if you go to the store, you can see all the recent stuff. Here, I just put the first episode of Hauntomancer that's on cassette tape that only patrons, only somatic patrons have had access to, is now public. People can order it. Same with the new album or Eric's recent published zines, all the books, like all of this. It makes sense to me, speaking of the jiggy thing and speaking of like how to branch all of this. This is what We the Hollowed was always intended to be, was a kind of umbrella, an ability, like an avenue and a current to publish all of this stuff, whether it's like, you know, these printed newsletters or, you know, even hosting articles on the site. You know, here I talk about the last, or how it was started. There I am announcing to the world We the Hollowed 10 years ago at an art gallery. That was my room back then. This is the digs of mine all the way back then in Portland. Just a scramble-brained ruffian creating all this stuff. But yeah. So all of that is like, it makes sense when people say you need to do things for 10 years before you kind of like figure out what it is. I think that's true about everything I've done. With Dakota Slim, with the music, you know, with We the Hollowed. Eric's putting out amazing book reviews that are getting, you know, widely circulated, which is really cool. So the website's still going strong. We have spent 10 years building all of this, and I feel like it's finally coming to a head. And it's just so funny that it's coming to a head right as I reintegrate back into Portland. So I'm heeding the signs, like I'm listening, I'm paying attention, you know, to everything that's happening and the synchronicities that are abound. Like I'm very aware, you know, like whether it's hauntomancy and those workings and thrusting me back into Portland and like spending too much time tinkering with back end things that it's getting in the way of actually creating. Like I'm listening, I'm paying attention to those specters. I'm paying attention to We the Hollowed. I'm noticing the 10-year nostalgia loop, as Jonaside pointed out, from our dear friend C.W. Chanter. I'm noticing how to dance with that 10-year nostalgia loop, how to commune with it, how to work with it, how to progress with it. I'm paying attention. I'm hearing all of the signs, and I'm heeding them too. So it's all coming together, and I'm really excited. This week I'll post more about the tethers in Patreon, and also I'll get around to editing some form of Prag Magic episode. Maybe I'll take some from this Patreon stream and hobble together some form of testament that I can publish out into the world saying, hey, we have all this crazy stuff happening. We've never been more productive creatively wise, but I'm also moving to Portland, so things might be stuttered, but hey, I'm moving to Portland. Like, remember that? Remember the Portland occult podcast triangle with Arnemancy and Alex Cast? That can happen again, you know? It's amazing. Like, everything seems to be confoundingly like tethering, you know, at a hyper speed. So I'm in that tryst where I'm taking my time, I'm being present, I'm relishing and reveling in the bounties of the past 4 or 5 years in Seattle, and I'm also future casting, you know, as hard as I can about what's going to happen once we touch Earth in Portland. And I will be in and out of Portland over the next few months, looking at places and dotting this line. But it was important to me to at least be off the cuff and just tell you guys, you know, what's been happening. I feel like I haven't been as like fluid about all the goings on. And it's great to see you, Jonaside, Jilly, and Renee, Miss you guys very much. Thank you for joining me. Thank you to everybody who's checking this out, at a later time. Again, I will probably cobble something together to put out into the public world, a Pragmagic, episode, saying all of this maybe in a more concise manner. But there's a lot coming, and I'm really excited about it. But I'm also trying to remain present and enjoy, this nape of summer that is about to be a transformative few months while things get radically different in the next year or so. More music too. I will have, I'm thinking a single at least for the new album will be done before the fall, and I'm thinking the album probably should be out around Halloween. Honestly, that's what I'm shooting for, because I've gotten so far with it, and it's, if I didn't take that time, if I didn't rest in between or recontextualize it, if I didn't if I didn't fight my better urges or even maybe better angels about just putting it out and moving on, then I don't think I would have had such a resonant piece of work that's coming down the line. And I can say that pretty much about everything. So, anyways, thank you so much for hanging out and joining me. And there's so much more down the line. But I think I'll end it there and let you good folks get back to your lovely Sundays. I was born on a Sunday, and I shall rest on one too. Big love to everybody. And with that, a very emphatic haunt on.